5-minute mark, so we're going to get started with our second webinar for 2023. This weekend, we have a special guest. We have Shannon Robnett, who is a developer and real estate investor based out of Boise, Idaho. He's a friend of mine and a co-partner on a property that we own in Washington State. And I've known him for 2 years through the Real Estate Guys Mentoring Club, where we met on a trip in Belize and just had really good synergy and realized we wanted to work with each other and help each other out with our goals. So I'm really excited to bring him on. He's been a mentor to me and a wealth of information. I'm going to let him introduce himself and go through his bio and take us through the pros and cons of large multifamily real estate development syndications. Shannon.
Well, thank you so much, George. I really appreciate you guys having me on and giving me part of your Saturday. George, you're a little bit modest as far as your intro about yourself and how we're working together. I mean, guys, if you guys get the opportunity to sit down and talk with George, you'll find that not only is he one of the best individuals I have the privilege of knowing, he's also really smart. So, and if you need a knee replaced or a shoulder replaced, he can help you out with that too on a Saturday. So, but I've been in construction and development my whole life. I'm second generation builder developer, fourth generation realtor. And I grew up in a house where, every night at dinner, my parents were talking about stuff. My mom was selling single family stuff. My dad was building small industrial and a few other things. And they were always talking about what was going on in the market, in the world. And so I always saw how development fit hand in hand with just communication. Since then, I've done about $450 million in ground up construction. 350 of that has been for myself and my partners. We've done hospitals, police stations, medical facilities, schools, fire stations, city halls. So we built the gamut. We've done just about everything. And over the last 4 years, I've really made the transition from contractor for others for hire to being a solely self-sufficient general contractor where we build our own stuff. And now I'm taking it into the next step, which is I'm working with several construction companies in my area to take over my workload so that we will no longer self-perform the actual construction, because what I'm finding is just the resources of my own personal time. As George mentioned, time is the one thing you cannot get any more of, regardless of what you spend. And so we're making that final transition. But one of the things that I've found is that, when you start looking at the possibilities of what development can do, you start to open up a whole nother world. When you look at supply chain constraints, when you look at an area and, you sit back and you go, wow, what this place could really use is and I've just figured out how to be that solution. And one of the things that I've looked at just in my journey is, if I'm that solution for someone, I can make a 10 to 12% fee on building the building. So, I build a $40 million apartment complex, I make a fee. But if I own the $40 million apartment complex, then I have a whole different set of things that come into play, and it's just an exponential thing. And so I really got to a place where I knew that I had to step away from that, and I had to get into my own developments. But one of the things that I wanted to talk with you guys about is, what is the benefit of large scale commercial developments versus value add or just buying cash flow, And I think the first thing that someone has to do is you've got to figure out, why are you investing? Because I think that, it's not a one size fits all in the investment world where you just dial in and go, well, I'm doing an investment, so it must be this. And really understanding that, large scale multifamily allows for some amazing opportunities if the investor profile fits well. And let's talk about some of the things that are different between multifamily ground up development and value add. You know, in the sense of value add, you're purchasing someone else's cash flow. Somebody else, they built the building back in 1973 for, you know, let's call it $1 million. It's appreciated at 3 or 4% a year as rents have grown. It's now a 15 or $20 million asset that you're dealing with, and you have the opportunity to sell that based on what you see in the marketplace, what is happening with rents in the marketplace. And so when you buy that multifamily value add, you're going to take their $10 million product and you're going to add to it, and you're going to raise the rents, and you're going to take it from 10 million to 12 or 13 million, and you're going to enhance that cash flow. Meanwhile, you're getting cash flow all along the way. You're getting the benefit of the bonus depreciation right up front. And depending on how you set up your entity and how it spends money, you can go ahead and depreciate out all those additional improvements in the same year. But multifamily development is a little bit different, because from the beginning, you're creating that value add. You know, I was doing some numbers on a project that we're just wrapping up phase 1 on. We've spent about $19 million building out phase 1. The rents on it will be solid. Lease up will be finished here in a couple of months, and the asset will become worth $26 million. And that's at a 5 cap. And so when we look at that, we were able to take $20 million or $19 million and make a $7 million profit on a $10 million equity investment. So when you look at that, and that is a consistent thing, that is in a market that is not as easy as it was 18 months ago when everybody was making a 2x, right? Because interest rates were great. But the difference between that is we're assembling the sticks and the stones, and we're paying the framer, and we're going through all the motions of really assembling the actual goods and services to create the house. And the house cost about $225,000 to build. And, you know, they're worth 350 when you apply the cash flow strategy, right? Because as you guys are all aware, commercial assets trade based on the cash flow, based on the income stream that is attached to it. And so when you're able to make that leap, you're going to find that there's probably not a stronger asset class than ground up multifamily. There's not one that is more in demand than ground up multifamily. When you look at what we're faced with nationwide, the housing shortage that we're going to continue to have for foreseeably the next 2 to 4 years, by anybody's estimation, needing 4 to 6 million housing units in America, you're seeing that it doesn't matter how much you push rents in the value add, you've got to bring on the new stuff. Another thing that one would also argue is that in the value add, you've got, anywhere from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, you've got older product. You're not dealing with brand new. But the Class A, especially in an area like this where you have a recessionary factors that are playing in on things, when you deal with the Class A product, you're dealing with the Class A tenant. Now, this is not a comment on socioeconomic class. This has everything to do with dollars. And the people that are renting brand new apartment complexes have the largest amount of disposable income, and their rent consumes the smallest percentage of that disposable income. So when you really look at recessionary factors, and I've been preaching this for a long time, eggs are $6 a dozen. I don't know. I didn't know that they were such a commodity anymore. I'd have bought more of them. But the reality is that when working class people start dealing with $4 gas and $6 eggs, and the price of a steak anymore is $15 for a pound for a decent T-bone, you're really eroding the buying power of the working class. And so when you're looking at the C and the D, even the B level apartments, those guys are spending upwards of 37 to 40% of their income on their rent. Statistically nationwide, In the Class A product, that's less than 29% of their disposable income goes to rent. So you're dealing with different class products and you're dealing with different opportunities, but there's some risks involved. There's some things that have to happen. And some of the pitfalls that people run into with ground up multifamily is that they come unprepared. They come to it with the thought process that it's quick, and it's not. They come to the thought process that it's easy, and if it was, everybody would do it. But it's not. What's the saying? It's difficult, but it's not hard, right? And if you know the steps to take, and you know the ways to vet and understand your sponsors and who you're working with, ground up multifamily, in my opinion, is the most lucrative option out there, and it offers the longevity and the life that, we saw a lot of people make a lot of money in the last couple of years by trading assets. But wouldn't it have been nice to have those assets that they bought in 2015, 2016, that they sold in 19, right before the market went nuts, and still have them today? But they made the return, and they have now moved on because they did their value add. They took it from this point to this point, and they got the apex of the funds that they could make on it. When you look at multifamily from a development point of view, you've got the acquisition and the development, and that gets you an amazing amount of equity. And in a lot of cases, we're able to pull out 100% of our cash that we put into the deal at stabilization, and then able to enjoy that asset for a long time. And the reality is, when you do this right, and you start with your underwriting, and you start looking at your area, and you make sure that where you're needing to go, there's demand. Your zoning requirements are going to allow you to do that. You're going to be able to, complete the project in a timely manner. You're not dealing with market conditions that are, you're losing jobs. I mean, Detroit would be a terrible place to do a ground up multifamily, right? People are moving out of that area instead of into that area, right? You're wanting to pick a market that is growing, right? And so you've got to be particular about how you do that. Another thing that a lot of people look at as a scary factor and a problem in ground up multifamily is controlling cost overruns, right? A lot of people go into these things with a low bid mindset and mentality, where they select a contractor based on price alone. And the reality is, the way that we've done most of our business is a cost plus scenario, where we work as the contractor with our development team, but we create a winning strategy where the funds that are saved based on the budget, the contractor participates in that upside, right? And the time that is shaved off of that development schedule, the contractor participates in that upside. I currently have a project going right now that my interest payment on it is running about $175,000 a month, right? That's a fairly decent amount when we're at the very end of the project, and that's when everything begins to show. But if we are able to save 5 days, we're talking about 20 grand, right? We're talking about some serious money. And so if we're mindful of that schedule, and we can meet that schedule or exceed that schedule by not necessarily picking the cheapest of everything, the cheapest plumber, maybe the cheapest concrete guy that's got 5 people, maybe you pick the next level up that costs a little bit more, but he's got 10 guys or 15 guys, so he can come in and put in all the foundations in a couple of days instead of a couple of weeks, right? And so when you really begin to understand who you're partnering with, whether you like it or not, you're partnering with your general contractor, and understanding that and motivating that is important. And having worked on both sides of the general contractor nameplate, I've really learned that we all do this for money, right? I mean, the main driving factor of development and construction and multifamily tenancy, it gets down to the dollars and cents of it all. And when you can properly motivate your team that says, hey, when you can save us money, when you can perform faster, you can acquire some of that savings, you really create it's not a competition. It's not a change order environment where every time you turn around, the contractor's trying to hit you with a change order. It's more of an environment that says, hey, let's work on this together and let's be part of a team to get these things done so that we can have the best possible product as quickly as possible, because ultimately you're looking to get to the cash flow. You're looking to get to that stabilized financing. You're looking to get to that refinance that gets your cash back out and allows you to go to the next deal. Some of the other things that people don't look at is they look at an area of town and they say, hey, you know what? This would be a great place to put multifamily. And they don't realize that there's 4 other projects being planned in a 2-block or a 4-block or a 2-mile radius. But that's pretty easy to figure out with a quick trip down to the local planning and zoning board and looking at the meeting minutes to see who's also applied for application for large scale apartment complexes, because 99.9% of cities, Houston being about the only one that you don't have to go through the zoning compliance, you've got to get zoning recognition that allows you to do these things. And I've watched guys, I saw this recently in my town. There was 2 car wash signs went up within 3 days of each other on opposite corners of this amazing intersection, right? And there was a pause. One guy ran out and he was started like the next day. And there was like this pause of about a month. And then the other car wash sign disappeared and a for sale sign came up, right? But if somebody had done a little bit more investigation about where the competition was coming to, because likely you're not the only one with that fabulous idea, right? There's somebody else that looks at it and says, this would be a great location for this. And they may be, just a mile down the road or within your radius of where your things are going to, your tenants are going to come from. So that's another thing to look for. Another thing to pay attention to is who is your sub-market in that market. And what I mean by that is because you're going to be brand new, you're obviously going to attract the top tier of tenant, whether that's at $1,000 a month in rent, they're willing to pay a little bit more, whether that's, $2,500 a month in rent, you're still looking at that level of finish that you're going to do inside. Are you going to do Formica countertops? Are you going to do granite? Are you going to do quartz? Or what level are you going to build that out at? Because that is also where you're focused. So if you're in a luxury area, going with working class finishes are not going to work. It's got to be conducive with the area. My mom always told me it's never good to be the first one into the subdivision because there's always a race for the last lots in the subdivision. And you never want to be the highest price home in the subdivision. It's always best to be the lower middle because you're going to get the benefit of everybody around you. And so I've watched where luxury apartments have, quote unquote, tried to set the trend and have been drugged down by the competition that's around them that really isn't competition, but is more affordable. And people look at it and go, I can live right down the street from the Taj Mahal and not have to pay their prices and still live in a great neighborhood. That development will gentrify the neighborhood, but at a cost to itself because it will always struggle because it's above market. You want to be $35 more than what's there right now, but not $300 more. And that's one of the techniques that we use when we fill new multifamily. You're turning over typical of our product is 12 and 24 plex garden style. You've got a certificate of occupancy. Now you've got 24 fresh units. You don't want them all to have the same expiration date on the lease. So you do some short terms. You do some 3 months or some 6 months or some 9 months, and you're able to get a premium for those rents because somebody is in town for 6 months, whether it's, traveling nurse or whether it's just going to be here for 6 months and they just want a short lease. They're having a house built, whatever it is, you're able to get a premium for those. And I've always told my leasing staff that I want to be $35 more than the next guy because that's really the difference in a meal, right? That's not a lot to anyone. And if you're willing to pick me for $35 more, there's something about my apartment complex, something about my amenities that you like more than the next guy. That means when it's time to renew and I'm going to bump you another $50, you're probably not going to leave because there's something about my complex that you like, whether it's proximity to the freeway, whether we're right across from your favorite ice cream shop, or whatever it is, there's a reason for that. And you get to do that in a way that is allows you to really kind of hyperinflate your lease ups when you have that flexibility that you get with multifamily and when you're bringing it on initially. And then once you get to the stabilized, you're starting to deal with the other things where you really have to concentrate on the amenities themselves. And, I never actually lived in an apartment complex, but I've owned enough of them and I've walked enough of them. You can always see how the newer apartment complexes have the amenities that people want. Dog washes that weren't even a thing before, dog parks, really work-centric clubhouses. We're doing one right now. We're doing a large-scale 200-unit multifamily, 7-story product where we've got very small but very distinct dens. They're about a 4x6 area. That has, a small desk, strong Wi-Fi connection. Everything is set up right there. There's a drawer that slides out that could be a file cabinet or hold a printer, so that the whole work from home concept is something that we can build into our new product that really struggles to get there with older stuff. And so when you see the opportunities that you have, you want to look at ways that you can fit the market, you can fit the upgrade, you can fit into being, right on the leading edge of what people are wanting currently with what they're doing in their apartment living, and still make sure that you've got income for that. One of the other things that we're able to do with new construction and development is we're able to build in additional features that we can derive income from, like internet, cable. Those things we're able to set up on a large scale and resell, that in a lot of the older complexes, there's just nothing there for that. So when you're really looking at the difference between what you can do with ground up multifamily, new construction, and value add, it's really like comparing a sports car and a truck. They both have features. They'll both get you where you want to go. But in my opinion, if you're looking at something that you're wanting to maximize your appreciation and also look at the longest window of opportunity to hold the asset without additional improvements, the choice is clear that ground up multifamily is definitely going to provide you with that. Some of the drawbacks to that is the duration from the time you invest to the time you start receiving cash flow. Some of the other ones can be maybe having a sponsor that hasn't done the full cycle of the construction and development, because that is a different thing. We were just talking about that with Dr. Bio before you guys got on, where the project that he's got in Northwest Arkansas, somebody was building along and they were doing a great job of building it, but stabilizing and managing it while continuing to build it, while continuing to fund it, while continuing to do all those things, it was a little bit too much. And so when you're looking at that, you really want to make sure that you're evaluating your sponsor to make sure that they have the financial ability to complete the project, B, the history, the resume that says, I've done these, I know what I'm doing, I can get this done, I can make this happen, and or we have team members involved that are doing that, because that can really lead to some expensive mistakes. I've watched builders, very successful builders, build houses on the wrong lots, right? Just common mistakes like that. So then, this gentleman had to go negotiate with the guy that actually owned the lot. He had a fully built house on it. And on it, thankfully that conversation went fairly well. But you've got to make sure that you're doing, the right things, and that the people that you're partnering with and that you're sponsored with and through have that track record and have that ability to manage that. One of the other things that can be a little bit dangerous with ground up multifamily is not having your end financing lined up. A lot of times people go into construction and development with just a construction loan with a promise of a permanent loan that isn't fixed. It's somewhere in the future, and that will be determined at the time. And in the economy that we've had over the last couple of years, that's been very easy to go into that knowing that, hey, we got 3% on the other side. Well, over the last 8 months, as interest rates have continued to rise, it's put a little bit of strain on people. So people are coming to the end of the construction and development cycle, and they're looking at it and they're saying, hey, when this was a 3% interest rate, this thing cash flowed like a banshee, and it provided me with, a refinance that allowed me to pull my cash out. Now we've had some cost overruns. We've taken a little bit longer to get to delivery, and now we're at a 6% interest rate. It now has a negative cash flow. And there's this term that everybody's throwing around right now called DSCR, which is debt service coverage ratio. And when you can't get your debt service coverage ratio to be about 1.25, which is where banks like to see stabilized assets at, you've got to bring cash to the table to get that to happen. And so again, having a good review of the underwriting and understanding where your pain points can be and your process along the way to make sure that at the end of the day, you're all doing a great job and getting where you need to go is all part of that sponsor job, right? That's all part of the general partner's responsibility. So you really want to make sure that as you do that, you make sure that you're with the right people, doing the right things and going the right direction. Another thing that people forget, when you do a value add, you put your money in, you get a cost segregation, usually that first year, so that gets handed out. Everybody gets a piece of that for their tax returns, and everybody loves that. You don't get that right away with the ground up multifamily. You have to wait till you put it into service. So we had a building that we wound up with a couple of delays, and we wound up finalizing the building on January 5th. You can guess how disappointed my investors were, because they went from 100% bonus depreciation last year to 80% bonus depreciation this year, and we missed it by 5 days. Right. So there's reasons why, again, everybody makes mistakes. Everything can and should go like clockwork, but they don't always. And so you've always got to make sure that you've got those contingency plans and you've got that complete understanding of really what the process and what the cycle is. But as I've said several times during this conversation, I can't think of a better product type and a more necessary product type than what you're seeing in ground up multifamily, the opportunities for investment and the opportunities for returns, the opportunities for longevity. And then when you wind up with situations where, now you've got rising interest rates and other things like that, there's opportunities to pivot with low income tax credit housing, which is something that we're exploring on a couple of our projects, so that we can make sure that we can continue to be viable into the future, because we do have quite a housing shortage. So I know that was kind of a lot. I tried to line that out so that you guys can honestly see both sides of that and understand what is good and what is bad. But after that, George, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was perfect. That was perfect. I think that was plenty of ammo for us to kind of generate some really good questions. So I'm going to invite everybody. You can either unmute and come off camera, or on camera and ask questions. You can also post your questions in the chat box. Bio will be looking at that and just giving out the questions as they come in. I want to thank Shannon again. It's definitely, I learn something every time I do these webinars, and tonight is no different. I definitely had some questions in mind that I can kind of kick this off with. Shannon, you kind of mentioned like the different phases that can go into the whole ground up development, and things that I'm starting to learn about are how you can syndicate different parts of those phases. Like there's the land banking, there's the horizontal development, there's the vertical development. I was just curious if you can kind of talk about that, almost kind of like this is X, Y, and Z, just in case you didn't know.
Well, so there's definitely those phases. So you take you found a piece of ground that's in a great area. It's going to provide excellent opportunity for you to develop. You've checked with the city. You've got the ability to get it rezoned. And you go through that rezoning process, and now you have something that's R20 or R48 and allows for, multiple units per acre, and you're able to do all that. There's an opportunity there to make an exit. There's an opportunity to buy something at, $10,000 an acre and make it worth $50,000 an acre. And some people do that. Then there's people that come in and they buy the entitled ground because they don't want to wait through the whole process, or they don't have the ability to go through all that. They don't want to deal with the land planner. They just want to come in. They want to pick it up here. The plans are ready, or they're going to bring their plans with it and they're going to build it out and they're going to have that finished product. And then they're going to sell it to a group that is looking to come in and hold the long-term asset. So there's really three areas there that you could break them up into. One of the dangers is if you're using financing on your land development, you may run into a scenario where I ran into a gentleman that I went to school with the other day, who's a chiropractor here in town. And he mentioned that he was in real estate development now. And I said, "Oh, that's amazing. What are you doing?" He says, "I'm developing subdivisions." And I said, "Oh, that's fantastic." What he has done is he has acquired a large piece of property. He used his 401k, leveraged that, got a loan against it as well, and is now sitting there with one of 4,000 residential lots in the area. He's got about 100 lots. So there's 4,000 lots available in the area. And with the slowdown in the economy, he's stuck, right? So, and I've been in that position. So one of the things you want to look at is when you're doing that land entitlement, you want to make sure that you are your own exit plan and that you're not heavily leveraged, because you could be longer than you think, because somebody has to agree with what you did the entitlement on, right? So buying entitled ground is very easy because you can look at it, you can go, yes, that's the right number of units, that's the right count, that gets me where I want to go. I'm going to jump in and buy that, and now we can very quickly go to the vertical construction part of it.
Cool. So another question that kind of came to mind, and I think Bio can relate to this, is the whole idea of incentivizing your contractors, giving them some upside. We were talking about this with some of Bio's developments and his rehabs. What different ways or different examples can you give incentive to the contractor? Is it equity? Is it just bonus? And what does that look like?
Well, yeah. So I'm actually doing the equity portion currently with the contractor that I'm using. I've known him for a long time. And, it's like anything. If I give you $5, great. I gave you $5. Uncle Sam steps in and says, "Oh, by the way, we want our piece of that." And you go out and you spend your $5 and it's over. But if I give him $3 and $3 worth of equity for performing the job early by, meeting the deadline, exceeding the deadline, now all of a sudden he's got $3 that's going to continue to pay him again and again and again. And it's also going to incentivize him in a way, because now this is his apartment complex or her apartment complex. They're involved and they're now owners. And it's a mindset shift that is the most amazing thing. It's like how I got my kids to read books, right? I mean, just straight up cash, right? I had one daughter that just wasn't really into cash, but she didn't quite get the correlation between cash and cookies, right? So I had to motivate her just with cookies. But if you get them to understand what that motivation is, you can get an extraordinary amount of effort and thought process and delineation of how this is going to go faster by making that the incentive. And so a lot of cost savings plans that we look at are, if you save me $1, I will give you 30 cents of that dollar in equity in the project. And that's going to come at finished product at appraisal, right? So we have a metric. So we're not letting you in on the upside, but once we've created our value, we're going to let you be an LP up here. And that just really comes out of the GP side. I hold some of that extra equity. But that's just an amazing opportunity to incentivize, because they'll work faster, they'll work smarter. They'll come to you with ideas on how to reduce costs and do it the same way. Another thing that we do to incentivize our people is we do with more of a design build product, where we select our plumber, our electrician, our heating and air guys all before we start drawing the plans, because there's nobody going to build a better mousetrap than the guy that's got to install it. And the plumber is a lot better at this than the mechanical engineer. right? The electrician has seen this. He knows the easiest way to do this. The electrician just puts, the electrical engineer just puts lines on paper. So you can actually go back and say, here's our budget. You have to do it for this. You can pick your own engineer, and you can do your own design as long as I meet this criteria and have these things. And then here's my light fixture count, and here's what I want. So you're able to actually get all of their expertise and knowledge for free, because they're going to design it. You're not going to wind up with that special $5,000 light fixture or that weird thing that nobody ever has that some sales rep sells them on. You know, you're going to wind up with something that's practical, something that's easy to implement, and something that's easier to install by involving them up front. And they'll give you that information because they know they're going to get the work.
Yeah, that seems to be big thing as far as delays and holdups, like either the contractor or the permitting. So kind of having some solutions, some realistic solutions to kind of getting the contractors engaged seems like a huge thing. I think Bio had something to say on that.
I'm going to actually add to that. Thanks, Shannon. So we do flips, you know, so that's how we started with our contractor. So we actually do like a 70-30 split on the equity.
Yep. So
it got nothing, no contractor fee, but it got, you know, if we sell, we pay all the fees, and whatever we make, we split it. Yep. And what I noticed after we started doing that is he put his own sweat equity on it. You know, there's one time there was a storm that came through. We were literally like 5 days before closing, you know, before we were able to sell it. We're like, man, almost 5 days. This will not be our problem, but as fate will have it, you know, I called the insurance, basically the deductible, you know, it's basically just the same amount it's going to cost to fix it. So anyways, he fixed it just by himself and his friends, because it's like, man, we need to sell this. We need to make this income. So that's how much level of dedication you can get people to do once you start giving them equity. So it's better for you to cut yourself out a little, but with the ability for you to make the project successful. Yeah. So that, you know, I find that very useful, and I've been using it a lot, mostly on my own personal side. But, you know, I aim to try to use something like that, you know, of course, like a tiny slice to encourage them.
The other thing too, if they're not willing to bet on themselves, if they're not willing to say, hey, you know what, I can beat this schedule, I can save you money. If they're not willing to bet on themselves and their expertise, why should you? Right? If they're not willing to take that bait of, I can make more money if I work faster, I can massage this, I can make my friends and my partners in my contract more profitable for everybody. If they say, you know, I just do it for my fee and I just get paid, they're not going to bet on themselves. They're not going to put that effort in there, and you'll quickly divide those that you do want to work with and find that value in, and those that just aren't worth it.
True. Definitely.
I have another question about kind of a typical, from what I understand, a typical point of delay in these developments is the permitting process or zoning. Could you talk a little bit about kind of what that really looks like for an experienced developer like yourself versus someone who's not as experienced? Where can they get hung up? Where can they optimize?
Well, I can tell you, even in my experience, so I've got a project going right now that we put it under contract, and there's, in my opinion, you know, everything starts with a good contract. And so my contract on the purchase stated that I would, this was a $5 million land purchase. I was going to purchase the land for $5 million 30 days after I was granted approval from City Council for the project. And they wanted me to put up a $200,000 earnest money. I offered them a $500,000 promissory note earnest money. And they kind of asked me, why a promissory note? I said, well, a promissory note, why would I put up hard cash if the City Council denies me? That's the only way I can get out of this deal. Why would I do that? But then 3 days after City Council approved me, I would release the $500,000. I would replace it with cash, and I would release it to the sellers. Well, they agreed to that. we go and we're doing this piece and we have to rezone the property. So we take the piece and we're rezoning it. Well, there's 3 different ways that a surveyor can measure land. One is in feet, one is in tenths, and one is in rods. And the rod was a physical rod that they used. Well, the problem with this property was from the west, they had measured in rods, and from the east, they had measured in feet. And there was literally a piece that started out, it was 6 inches wide in the front, and it was 1.5 feet wide in the back, and it was 300 feet long, that was actually not in the same zoning. It was zoned, it got counted in the neighbor's piece when the neighbor rezoned to a different zoning than this. And so I had to take it out of the city, go back to the county, go through that process to rezone what's this little piece of property. And there was no way you would have found this other than going through the development process, and it wasn't discovered until the very end. And then we had to come back. It took 18 months. Had I purchased the property and then gone through the process, that would have been 18 months of interest carry that I would have carried forward on that. So you take all these little things and you add them up and you learn how to do this in a way that makes sense so that you don't wind up making mistakes like that. But the one thing that you have to have as a developer is you have to have forgiveness for yourself, because it's little things like that that can hang you up for 12, 18 months while you go through this process. But, you know, if you're using a good team, if you're using, reliable people, I mean, what would have been worse would have been if we'd have gone through the whole process, built all the units, and then found this when we went to final our plat and do our final inspections. We would have been stuck for 18 months with all the finished buildings and unable to inhabit. That would have been hugely more expensive, because now we've spent $60 million and we can't sell it. We can't inhabit it. We can't collect rent on it. Right. So I think there's always room to learn, but the reality is there's, a good team and bringing everybody together and understanding your roles, and then also making sure that your contracts are written in a way that makes sure that you have the advantage to be able to do the things that are necessary without losing the land or having to put up hard earnest money or things like that.
Do you find that you have to kind of cultivate your relationships with those
Absolutely.
city and state councils and kind of be able to call them when you need and just be the guy off the street?
When I first started, I used to go in, because I was younger then, but I used to go in, and the lady's still there at Ada County, and I used to go in and go, "Hey, I'm new. Can you help me? Right? I don't understand what my issue is. Can you help me?" And as I've cultivated those relationships where I'm not the smartest person in the room, I've been able to get a lot of information from people, and I've begun to create relationships. So my land surveyor we've been working together for 20 years. My civil engineer and I are really good friends. We've been working together my whole career. Because I know and understand, and I've trained him, he's trained me, he knows what to help me look for. So instead of just doing the civil engineer's job, he's also looking at the due diligence that he and I have developed together over the last 28 years as we've encountered things like this. So it's always, in my opinion, it's always better to build and develop with relationships rather than chasing the dollar of who's cheaper or those kinds of things, because that's what gets you to the front of the line. That's what gets you when you call down to the city and you go, "Hey, Josh, this is where I'm at. This is what I got. Oh, that sounds like a problem. Let's look at this as a way to solve that and maybe get you some help."
Yeah. We got Deji. So Deji, can you go ahead?
Hi, everyone. Shannon, great just great listening to you. Actually listened to one of your interviews with Ken McElroy.
Oh, yeah.
Georgia put me on it. And, really enjoyed that. So
Awesome.
kudos to you for your momentum.
Yeah.
Question. Now, George actually alluded to the question I had a little bit, but specifically during the course of your intro, you talked about cases where some sponsors had deals packaged 5 years ago. They're trying to exit now. The market has switched on them, and now they're like they're holding the bag. So have you personally had any of those happen to like with any of your projects?
No.
And what do you recommend people get out of that pickle?
So the reality is when the market went nuts, everybody's underwriting tended to chase the market, right? Now here's the thing. I'm not real smart. I need all the help I can get to look that way. So if I can make a deal work at a 7 cap, which is what, if you look at my 28-year history of the business, a 7 cap is really where industrial has always traded, is a 7 cap. Multifamily has always traded between a 5.5 and a 6.25. I've always underwritten my large scale multifamily to a 7.5 cap. So when it exits, we just had an exit, it was 104% in 20 months. We had another exit that was 49%, right? 39%. When you have exits like that and you're projecting 19, everybody's thrilled with you. If you had a 19% exit projected and you delivered 18, nobody's happy, right? And you have to understand you're facing a lot of consequences and you can run into situations like this. So when I saw that we had 2%, 3% interest, I knew that that was short term. I knew that that was not going to live for very long. So we exited on a couple of deals because I have the unique ability to be able to create another one, right? A lot of people can't go build another one. I can. That's my model. That's something I do. But when you're doing that, you're just simply trading value add for value add. What you're selling at a 4 cap, you're going to go buy from somebody else at a 4 cap, right? So you're kind of going with a lateral move. Yeah, thank you, George. 7% is a capitalization rate, and I assume that everybody knows a cap rate. I'm sorry. So I always like to design in the wow factor, right? Because I like people to be happy with me. I don't like it. You know, we've got a deal right now that we started out thinking we were going to sell it at $67 million. Current value on it is close to 90, right? Nobody is mad that it took me 4 months longer because of the COVID delays. Nobody, right? All of a sudden, a lot of things are forgiven. And I can tell by your smile, you would forgive me too, right?
That's a given. Well, appreciate it. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
So I had another question because I know there are a lot of us here who are LPs or aspiring to be LPs, and even some of us who may want to work very closely and directly with a developer like yourself in the future. So do developers typically sell, or do they hold these properties for long-term cash flow? And I think you kind of started talking about that when we were describing kind of that situation in Arkansas with the builder. But what about a developer like yourself? What do we typically see if we're an LP and we want to build something and actually hold on to it for the cash flow? What are we typically seeing in the space?
You know, that's like, I mean, I don't know that there is a typical. I know developers that all they do is they will get the whole project entitled. They will be ready to begin construction, and they will go find someone that wants to partner with them, do what Dr. Bio was talking about, where they come in and they say, hey, we're going to build this out for you. You're going to bring all the capital. You're going to bring all the bank financing and everything. And we're going to take 30% of the upside, and they build it, right? They bring their expertise to the game. There's other people that simply want to buy that finished product. There's other people that, you know, hold it long-term. What I look at doing is I look at it and I realize that every investor is different, and anybody that says, you know what, this is the investment for you without knowing what your investment thesis is really short selling you, because the reality is you don't know unless you know what their investment thesis is. It's really hard to figure that. So what we do is we say, hey, we're going to build this out, and we have people that are looking for appreciation jump into that deal. So once we get it stabilized, we exit at stabilization, and then we exit to another group that's looking for cash flow. So now we take that and we say, hey, we've got a brand new product here. You know, think about this, George. You're talking about, we got an $85 million, $90 million sale going to happen here by the end of the year, right? Think about realtors' fees, closing costs, title insurance, things like that. You're on a $90 million deal. You're talking about somewhere between probably about $5 million by the time you've got, your realtor's fees in there and everything else. Well, if we can avoid that, we can afford to sell for $85 million. The other guys get a $5 million discount on a brand new product, but it's also right there where it starts out at about a 4% cash on cash return and grows as the rents go up, but they're buying brand new stabilized product. Some guys like to roll from one to the other, but when you really understand the investment thesis and you say, hey, you're an appreciation investor, you have $100,000 and you're 20 years away from retirement, you need to go make this grow. Development is a great way to do that. And then when you're 50 years old and you've got $2 million worth of money and you're starting to transition that into a 6% return, this is a great way to do that because you're getting into an asset where you're not going to be jumping in and 24 months later jumping out and trying to find another place to put your money. This is going to be a nice long-term hold, right?
Awesome. Great explanation.
We do the same with Majestic. We did that with a senior living, luxury senior living, in which in the beginning, it takes 18 months or so to complete. And then investors have no return during those times. And of course, you get a lot of messages like, what is going on? You update them, but it's very hard to stay 2 years without no cash flow. Okay. Yeah. And then eventually they start getting some cash flow and usually exit in a way. But also, yes, the exit was to another group of investors who come into what is called the income fund. But some people are able to exit.
Right.
Some will stay on, but some can exit. So that's very awesome, strategy, but you're doing it on a much, much larger scale.
Yeah. Well, and, one of the things that I do too, Dr. Bio, is people are always wondering what's going on, right? So one of the things that we do is we put live cameras on our job sites, right? So I've got, we see most activity on our cameras usually after 5 o'clock and on weekends, because people like to show their friends their investment, right? Look at this. Well, this is our investment, right? And that live action camera keeps people up to date, and it's just kind of a fun thing. So then I don't have to explain why we're 2 years between the time we started cash flow, because they could see truck coming, workers there, things like that.
Well, that's definitely better. We do drone video every month.
Yep.
Also,
we do that.
But yeah, you're right. So the camera is definitely a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah. The problem I have with the drone video is I get out there and start screwing around and I'm there half a day.
Having too much fun. Another strategy point, kind of keying off of what you guys were just talking about, is you highlight that this play, when you're in the development side, the ground up side, there's not the depreciation or the cash flow unless you stay in, longer. I found that mobilizing their funds from a solo or a retirement account. For me, it's a self-directed solo 401k, kind of fits nicely with this because I'm not worried so much about the tax, angle. It's a tax deferred account. I'm not worried about the cash flow because I don't want to touch that money because I'm going to pay a large penalty and a tax on it. So I invest in both development and in value add. My tax sheltered or tax deferred is usually in asset classes like a development versus things that are more value add, that give income, that give cash flow. They'll be invested with post-tax dollars. So just another angle strategy wise.
So there's another couple of strategies that we do too with the, one of the things that we see a lot is when people get into the appreciation, we've got a group of in this development and they're all looking for appreciation. And so when we come to the exit, I love to talk with my investors. And when we come to the exit, we offer the opportunity to 1031 into another deal, right? Because if we're all going to go out, we might as well look at it. And if we're going to go into another development, let's go into another development together. Let's buy the land. Let's get that going. Let's build this out so that we can sit there and do this again, leveraged with the tax benefits of not having to give away the money, but we've also been involved long enough that we would actually fall into that long-term capital gain tax if you did decide to go out. Another thing that I've personally done, George, is I invest in I believe it's a traditional IRA. Okay. And that traditional IRA means that I will pay taxes when I get it out, right? One of the things that happens in development is every year I get sent a questionnaire from your IRA self-directed place, and they say, what is George's value right now? And I have to do this. They're starting to come in. They're going to ask me. They're starting to come in this year so that I can evaluate that. And when you look at development, it is not liquid. It is the worst for liquidity. I mean, you have no cash flow. There's nothing coming off of it. We're not done. If this thing were to stop right now, it's worth 50 cents on the dollar. So I fill it out. I tell your IRA people that, hey, George's asset, he put in 100 grand, but if we had to cash out today, it's worth 50 grand. Then I've watched people transfer that from their traditional to a Roth. Roth is an after-tax environment. They pay a tax on the 50 grand.
That's it.
When their proceeds come hammering home and they've got a 30% return on a 4-year deal, their 100 went to 250 and it's all after tax. So just another little tidbit.
Hey,
That right here, what you just said right now was me showing up today.
We have
that
Luke,
and making it short.
Luke, come on.
While he waits to come on, I'm gonna drop the link to Shannon's talk on YouTube with Ken McElroy that Deji referred to. It's an amazing talk about development for 2023. So everyone should check that out. A lot of pearls in there.
And then I just put my website up there. If you guys want to go to my website, feel free. There's a link there to my calendar. I'd love to have further conversations with any of you if you want. I'll also send you a copy of my book. I was part of a book that we just wrote, and so I'll send you that too, just for listening to my madness today. Luke, how are you, man?
Hey, Shannon, thank you so much. I apologize, I'm at work right now, so I can't jump on camera. But first of all, thank you for taking time out to do this webinar. I have a couple questions about how you got started. I don't know if you talked about that in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, what made you jump in? And when you jumped in, what did you do? Did you join a developer? Did you get a mentor? Were you an LP in your first project? How did you jump in, and what made you jump in? And then, for those who are interested in doing what you're currently doing, what would you recommend we do to get in and to be successful?
So I'm a second generation builder developer, fourth generation realtor. So my parents were in this business, and I remember them talking about 1031s at the dinner table. And so I kind of grew up with it, but my very first development deal, this is really where I understood the value of development. So I'm working on this project, and we're building a building. It's a 30,000 square foot warehouse. And, it's at the time that building was going to cost about $1.5 million, $2 million. And I was going to make 100 grand. Okay. And I got to know my crane operator, and I got to know the little lady next door. And the lady next door, she was in her late 70s. She had an autistic son, and she lived in a house that was really run down, and it was in an industrial zone. And she was one of the last residential lots, and she was really wanting to sell. My crane operator was wanting a 4-acre yard, something with an old house on it, blah, blah, blah. So I tied up this piece of property with a $500 earnest money check, ran it through the city, got it rezoned for him, and sold it to him, and made as much on that deal as I made on the building. Right then, I realized that my value was higher as a developer than it was as a builder. Because as a builder, all I could do was build what other people wanted me to build. And unfortunately, I didn't really figure out the world of syndication until about 36 months ago, I was working with other people trying to convince a single check writer to back my deals, to do this, to do that. And I learned most of what I learned about syndication from a guy that came out of Hollywood, that actually that's how they raise capital for movies, because you can't get a loan on a movie. So they all syndicate the capital. And so I learned how to underwrite syndications from this guy. So it's kind of an odd way that I got started. But I got to tell you, it's a lot easier to get involved with developers and get involved with people if you learn how to become valuable to valuable people. And what I mean by that is, if you have something that you can do, you have free time, you want to learn, you want to be involved, you want to see how this goes, you can do that simply by being involved with people. I have an investor of mine out of San Diego. His son is in real estate school. He's in University of San Diego or whatever, and he's pursuing a degree in development. He asked me, "Can I come intern with you? I want to learn." And I said, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to figure out my social media strategy and how I can improve it, and then we'll talk." And he goes, "Why?" I said, "Because you have to provide value. I'm not going to sit here and employ you with this degree. Show me that you have value and how you could be valuable." He figured that out. He's now gone to me and 3 other developers and said, "Hey, I can do this for you." Now everybody wants this kid, right? So when you can figure out how to add value, whether that is in your local area, going to the RIA, going to the meetup, becoming part of that, figuring out where the land's at, figuring out where things are at, even looking at leasing strategies or things like that, that's a really good way to do it. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't want to do because they want to become the developer is they don't spend the time as the LP. You know, that was one of the things that really impressed me about George, was when we got together and we started doing this deal, he came on and he said, "Listen, I'm going to get involved with you. I'm going to be a part of this, but I really want to just learn everything you know. I know my part and it's not that, but please teach me that as we do this deal." And when you're coming at it from that point of view, especially when you're an LP in a deal, you should never find resistance from a sponsor that says, "Hey, yeah, this is your deal. Come on in. Let's go through it. Let's go, let's see what's going on." So those are a couple of ways that you can really get the information without being burdensome or without feeling like you're being burdensome, and then providing value to others that's going to get the door opened for you to see and experience what you want to learn.
That's definitely, the answer. Thanks, Shannon. To get involved, as you can see, for most people, they already have the background, as you see, like 3 generations, 2 generations. So the best is to usually find out what are you good at, also, like, are you good at finding the deal? Are you good at social media? Are you good at raising funds? Find what you're good at, because that's exactly the same strategy I used, being get mentorship from Guara, Majestic Investment Group. I was for like about 2 years. I was just, I was the LP, then, I kind of raised money for him. I helped him with, be a key principal. I helped being, basically underwrite the deal, and over time, eventually, I was able to learn, how to operate, and I was able to learn, even though I have my own properties, but it's a whole different game, syndicating other people's, getting other people's money. I can operate my own properties, no problem. But you have to, but the things you have to learn. So, so that's basically it. You can also go through like courses and things like that, but most of the time I'm not going to say they're completely useless, but they will teach you enough that, to get you excited and get started, but you will not be able to compete against people that have the actual training and the knowledge over many, many, many years.
Yeah. Dr. Bio, the other thing that you kind of hit on there is that when people partner, when they understand their specific skill set. If you're really good at raising money, find somebody that always needs more money. If you're really good at analyzing and underwriting, find somebody that could use that skill. If you're really great at property management, use that skill to get yourself in the door. Because those are the things that, multifamily or syndication is a team sport, because if you're wanting to go fast, go alone. If you're wanting to go far, go together, right? That's an Indian proverb. But the reality is, when you have a group and you've got somebody that's really good at this and this and this and this, you guys can handle that because you're not all consumed by one project. You're able to have 5 or 6 projects going at one time, and you're able to make that a reality. So, Dr. Bio, that was a really great thing to say. You do want to diversify and make yourself valuable to other people that way too.
I put some links for key principle up there. I feel like this group is a great group to have that knowledge, that awareness of what that is. A lot of us are physicians or busy professionals and can help out a GP team, and this will allow you to get closer to the conversations, So key principle is a very nice way to kind of get your foot in the door and learn more. Well, we're past the hour. We're 12 minutes past, and I think it's been filled with great information. So I want to thank Shannon again for taking the time out this Saturday evening. Like he said, you can get in contact with him through his website. He's definitely very active on social media as well. He's on all the platforms with really great content. And just as a reminder, we have our upcoming webinar coming in 2 weeks, in February 4th, and that's going to be with Mike Pine. I highly recommend this one. It's going to be discussing all the tax strategy and tax planning at the beginning of the year, so we can get that set for 2023. I think it's one of the most important aspects of investing is how much money you keep, right?
Yeah.
So with that, I definitely want to thank everyone for joining tonight. And if there's any questions, just feel free to hit any of us up. You can talk to Bio, talk to myself. You can reach out to Shannon with more questions. So thank you guys, and until next time.